Hello, Pflugerville. It's me, Dennis. Welcome to Tardan About Town. This is our first community town hall. As we're running this, I've gotten two guests that are willing to come on with me and to talk about our city. And these are two city council members. So I'd like everyone to welcome. And they're going to be here very soon. And here they come. First, we have City Council Member Jonathan Coffman for Place 1. And we also have City Council Member Melody Ryan from Place 5. Welcome, City Council members.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Hey, good evening. Oh yeah, good evening.
Good evening. Good evening, everyone. Now, on March the 24th, which was yesterday in real time, you both were at the City Council work session last night. So, Councilman Coffman, could you talk a little bit about what you heard and what was going on there?
Yeah, definitely. So there was a variety of different topics on the agenda last night, for sure. I think the biggest one is clearly the water restrictions that we're in, and I think the presentation that city leadership provided to council and the public last night, I think it went for almost an hour, if I recall. And so we got a ton of really detailed information, some updates to the timeline, and kind of a look ahead at where we're going next in terms of finishing up the repairs to the existing pipeline, as well as when the new 42-inch water line will be finished and what some of those steps look like. So, I think it was a really good presentation, very detailed, and I know Melody put together a very detailed Facebook page or post this morning that had a ton of her notes and takeaways from that as well. So that's between her and the city website. There's a ton of information out there from last night's meeting.
That's wonderful. Councilmember Ryan, what's your thoughts on where we are and how we're moving forward? Do you see a sense? Is there a light at the end of the tunnel? Because water is the new oil. I mean, we all have to understand that water is, even though it's so expensive for us, it is significantly underpriced. So we're going to have to figure out, people like Corpus Christi right now are going through extreme conditions. We don't know what this Colorado River and how it's going to go. So what's your sense of what's going on?
Well, the good news is that the water is flowing into the lake right now. When we first turned it on for a couple of days, they only had one pump on, which was about half of the normal flow into the lake. But now we have two pumps on. So we're getting, with the wells and Manville and the two pumps that are operating a little bit less than full capacity, because we don't want to stress the system with the temporary bypass for the water line. We're getting approximately 11 or 11.5 million gallons a day into the lake. So that's good news. And then our goal has been to try to reduce consumption and usage to about 4 million gallons per day. So that's about the level that we are in generally during winter. So, so hopefully with that good news and the water turning on, the mayor had shared with the community that the goal is to be able to leave restrictions at stage 3 and go to stage 1, which would allow once a week irrigation for outdoors. So that's the goal right now. So that's a little bit over a month, and I know it's a long time and people are worried about their lawns, but this is the safest path forward to ensure that we don't have to go through this again.
Right, and we'll hope. How is the work coming along, Councilman Coffman? When you're looking at all, because that's some heavy work that we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, it absolutely is. So think about a single continuous 30 and 42-inch water line that goes all the way from the Colorado River through Austin, unincorporated Travis County, in through Pflugerville, and all the way out to Lake Pflugerville, and doing that with no leaks and with an expected lifetime of 50 plus years. And so with all of the elevation changes between those 2 points as well, it's really it's really intense work. One of the items that we learned about last night in terms of the 5th break, this most recent one, was that the trench where that was happening is, I want to say, 40 feet in the ground. And so and it's, it's to make sure that the levels are right. It's the more elevation, the harder the pumps work, right? And so, you think about that complexity, and I think that's been really interesting and eye-opening to me as well, to really appreciate just how difficult that work is. It's not the same as me going out and hooking up a new water softener or something, right? Right? It's significantly different. And so that, I think, is really important for folks to keep in mind, is that as much as we want to be past all of this and have our great new water line and have increased reliability again, it really is just a lot of work that's underway. The other thing that I wanted to mention as well was I've gotten some questions yesterday and today as well about why we're skipping straight to stage 1 and skipping over stage 3.
Right. And we've lost your camera for a second. Congressman, there you are.
Oh, it did. I think my dog actually stepped on the cord. So sorry about that. And so really the practical part of why we're waiting for those extra few feet to get to stage 1 is because there's not a ton of value for the everyday resident in Pflugerville to getting to stage 2. It's really oriented around doing things like letting car washes open again and easing up on some of the construction restrictions, things like that aren't really going to help the folks that actually live here. So that's why we're basically trying to skip over that particular drought stage and just go to one that's pretty reasonable.
Councilmember Ryan, how much is this going to cost us? When you look at before the break, let's assume that there was no break or whatever, and now how is this impacting the city budget as far as we know?
So in total, we've had 5 breaks, and we did confirm with staff last night that the contractors have taken responsibility for breaks 1, 2, and 3, as well as 5.
So they are taking care of that. That's part of of what we've already said, that is within their realm of the responsibility.
Well, break 1 was due to a steel plate that was being removed that was unfortunately hit the existing water line during construction and caused that first break. And they're still researching the cause of break 2 and 3, but it's assumed to be related to that. And then break 5 happened about 5 miles away from that, again related to construction and something striking the water line. So those were breaks related to construction. So it's just break 4. And break 4 happened right at break 3 was fixed. And they were just doing the last parts of backfilling the dirt to provide stability. And unfortunately, the water was turned on prematurely, and it caused a break, which we've later determined to be under the creek. So that is more difficult to find. It took longer to identify where it was located. It's more complicated to fix, to get materials. So on the March 10th meeting, we approved a change order to cover the cost of locating the leak and the cost of completing the temporary bypass. Now, what is still yet to be determined is the full cost of the permanent repair. Right. And so staff shared with us that the permanent repair is not only going to be under the creek, which is about 120 to 130 feet long, but they're actually going to replace the entire length of the pipe where breaks 1, 2, 3, and 4 all occurred. So that's approximately 400 to 500. They're still working on the details, but so we're going to get that replacement. So the materials have been ordered. They've been expedited through, working with our partners to help in this crisis. So they're, that cost, we'll know more in early to mid-April about what that is going to be. But those costs are what we were told by staff is we're going to cover those costs through existing repair budget for this year as much as it allows, and then as well as our reserve funds. Now, we are required by city charter or resolution to have 25% of the operating expenses held in reserve for emergencies. And it's possible that we have slightly more than 25%, but the emergency reserve, the reserves are for emergencies just like this. So the costs are going to be covered through that reserve fund, and so it will not increase rates going forward. Now, of course, people are concerned, obviously, about still having to have expenses. So, there will be a complete review and analysis of everything that has happened, and we will do our best to, get the best outcome for the taxpayers. But that's down the road. Our immediate priority is filling the lake. Yep. Getting the permanent repair and the secondary raw water line connected to the lake, which should happen at the end of May. So that's the immediate focus right now. But we are, behind the scenes, doing that analysis for, and we'll get that information in the future.
That's wonderful. I know, Councilmember Coffman, I know that one of the things that you ran on was water and making sure that there was an equitable water cost and distribution. So is that being put off now because of the emergency as far as being able to begin to address that, or are you still beginning to lay those seeds down so that you will be able to do that?
Yeah, definitely. Pardon me. So it's actually still in progress. We've made some progress in terms of the city has put out essentially an RFP to do a new rate case, is what it's called, for the city, which looks at the next 5+ years and what the expected maintenance and infrastructure costs are going to be, and the people required to keep the system running, and they model out rates. And so one of the things that we've been able to do is make sure that the scope of that rate case specifically calls out that we want to see multiple new scenarios with the intent of easing some of the burden on our residents. And so that RFP has gone out. And so it's sort of we're walking and chewing gum at the same time with a lot of these things.
That was my point. There's plenty of going on. Oh, by the way.
Yeah, exactly. So no, I'm still hopeful that we'll get some results from that still in the first half of this year, going into budget season in the second half of the year, so that we'll be able to start communicating some of that here before too long.
Well, besides Councilmember Ryan, which I know that you have, go ahead, please. You go first.
Oh, I was just going to say, one of the major components of what we need to cover with the base fee is the debt for all of the infrastructure that we're doing. So we do have various types of loan programs. We have one through the federal government called WIFIA, and then we have certificate of obligations. And the WIFIA loan allows for flexibility in when you draw down on the money. And so you can time it more closely and when you need the money to pay the contractors. It also allows flexible repayment terms, and it allows interest only for 5 years up after the construction has completed. So I like to dig into those financial details to find out if there's ways that we can be responsible, and make sure our costs are covered, but also making sure that our costs are going to be amortized over the life of the improvement, so that people in 20 and 30 years who are still going to be getting benefits from these improvements, that, we pay every year, there's a fair share being paid. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And so just working, getting the data from staff and working with them and on these types of solutions to try to find ways to ease the burden on our ratepayers.
Well, that fascinates me, because the kinds of decisions that the city council and the mayor have to bring before the city manager to be able to do. Now, we have a city manager style government, right? So the city manager runs the city council, the mayor does not specifically run as they do in other cities. So in the city manager style, is the city council, Councilman Ryan, more like an advise and consent rather than a managerial function? Can you help me understand that more?
Sure. Yeah, so the city council's role is to set policy, direction, approve the budget, major contracts, and while the city manager and the staff handle the day-to-day operations. So no single council member makes decisions on their own. We do it collectively. And so where we have influence is in asking the right questions, bringing forward ideas, and working with our colleagues to shape the decisions. And so a big part of that role is preparation, understanding the details, so we can make those thoughtful decisions when it's time to vote on items that are set before us. So I've definitely, like Jonathan said, been learning a lot about water and water lines. Never knew that before. So, but I have a love of learning and I'm curious. And so, I really appreciate the time that staff is giving to the community and city council and really educating us on how these things work, because when everything's going well, you don't worry about what's happening
Oh
behind the
no, if everything's going fine, it's just when nobody sees, it's like where they don't see all the feet underneath the ducks that are
Mhm.
paddling like that, because it seems everything's working fine. But then,
Obviously, we prefer that way.
right, and it will be, but but that's what we're talking about infrastructure. Okay, so when you think about the decisions, because one of the things that we're doing here in Pflugerville is we've got to be forward thinking. How is it going to work going forward? How are we going to? One of the questions that came into me was, we have an opportunity to retain business, and what happens if we're losing business to Hutto and so what the incentives that we have in order to retain business here, and part of that I think is the solid business infrastructure that we are retaining here. Do you want to talk about that, Councilmember Coffman?
Sure. Yeah, I think that the existing way that council is thinking about those long-term investments is such that, we want to do things right the first time and not have to break things up into tiny pieces, not have to replace, if a water line is intended to work for 50 years, let's make sure that we're getting 50 years out of it, or more, right? And so that does make things more expensive up front. But there's always a balance there, right? Melody and I and the rest of council talk quite a bit about, what these future investments look like and what the appropriate level of funding and size of different projects is, given our growth rate. And ultimately, as I talk to developers or business owners, at this point in Texas's history, they want to know that, for example, a city that they're going to move to has a consistent, reliable water system. Because it's not the case in many Texas cities. You called out Corpus Christi earlier, and so it ultimately is actually an attractor of business and economic development to have a robust infrastructure. Now,
Right.
that doesn't mean that we can't not do all of the great stuff for quality of life beyond just the infrastructure as well, right? So
Yeah,
when you
and
think about,
we will talk about that.
okay, all right,
I want to get into the quality of life, because that's what we're having. We'll work on that in a bit. Councilmember
Mhm.
Ryan, you want to talk about because what are you learning about our infrastructure, and you learning about this, because there must be a learning curve. I was talking to Mayor Weiss, and he said, I had no idea this was the kinds of things that I've learned just since I've been in there have been extraordinary. So have you been learning a great deal, and how do you do this? These are volunteer positions. You give your time and your energy and your heart to this community for the benefit of that. So can you talk a little bit about your learning process and what's going on with you?
Well, definitely. People describe it as drinking from a fire hose sometimes, but also it's incremental learning. So it's taking the time, setting aside the time, on the weekend or the evenings to read the packets, to reach out to people, to ask your questions of people who are knowledgeable, to ask it of staff and to learn, and just talk with people and read. And there's a lot going on with economic development, and in addition to the infrastructure, we do have the Pflugerville Community Development Corporation. I did serve
Yes.
on there for a brief time. And so that's one of our tools. Not only, you talked about business retention, but not only with working with our current business and commercial partners, but also attracting new ones and also encouraging the existing ones to expand. So there's a lot of variety of things that can be done. With the sales tax that they collect, whether it's incentives or whether it's investing in infrastructure in specific road or water projects to open up an area, like specifically along 130 or 45, which are areas that we'd like to see grown.
Yes.
So we have a lot of options, but sometimes there is some patience involved.
Oh, patience? Are you kidding? What do you mean patience? I'm not patient. Instantaneous gratification takes too long.
Yeah, so there is sometimes everyone wants to know something now, and I do my best to try to answer questions, but sometimes it takes a while to really learn and dig into details and understand, and that's why we rely on the expertise of our staff to help provide that information for us to make good decisions, and also for us to be able to communicate clearly to the public about why we're doing something, the reason we do it in a certain order. Some people, just tell them what's happening and that's good. And then others, they want to dig into the details. They want to know a little bit more. And those, I read those comments and I love those questions because I think that's a really good question. Let me find out. So that's another way is through the public, and they're asking questions of me. I'm like, I want to know too. Now, I didn't even think about that. So I've learned a lot just from questions and other people's expertise in areas that, that I haven't had experience in. That's what's great about having a variety of people and experiences on council and in our commissions and boards, because they each bring a different perspective that's valuable to the whole.
Wonderful. I have one of the things I have a show called AI and I, where I really dig into the depths of AI and how and yet here in Pflugerville, I kept hearing the word flock, and okay, no idea what that was. Come to find out, this is a big deal. These flock cameras have been around for a couple which one of you wants to raise your hand if you want to begin to explain to us what flock cameras are and what this is? Which one of you wants to start?
I'm going to let Jonathan take the lead on that.
Jonathan, you start the lead, and then we'll ask questions. So go for it and help us out.
Yeah.
Give us a background on these flock cameras that are impacting us all.
Sure. Yeah. It's from a technology perspective, it's pretty cool. From a, how do we responsibly use it in public? It takes a little more thought. So ultimately, Pflugerville has two separate types of, call them flock systems. We have the license plate readers that you'll see on essentially any major roadway in Pflugerville.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's 80 something of those spread across in the city limits. And they're basically snapping pictures of the back of every vehicle that is on that road. And that goes into a big database that then the police department can use to search for vehicles, that were involved in crimes, stolen vehicles, folks that have warrants, et cetera. And so that's one part of it. And then more recently, the city signed a contract to add on video surveillance cameras powered by Flock. And that's one where I know a lot of folks have also been pretty concerned because there's been a couple of those cameras put up in parks. And then there's some, I'd say less intrusive ones as well. For example, the gate at the Public Works facility, for example, right?
Right.
And, really the situation with those is that we were seeing cases of vandalism that was adding up to tens of thousands of dollars, including, for example, at 1849 Park. Gosh, it's probably been 6 months or more now. Someone actually ripped a bunch of copper wiring out.
Right.
And so a bunch of the lighting had to be, rebuilt from an electrical perspective and some other issues. And so that's, those are really the two big public safety aspects to it. And we do track and get reports periodically, and the city has a couple of different pages on the website. One that sort of shows the cases and types of cases that are being closed by using the technology, and then also where
I believe our director Renee, you have this graphic here, so that we can see these are the yearly flock statistics. We have the fiscal year 23, 24, and 25. Jonathan, you want to talk about them?
Yeah, sure, I can do that. So, essentially looking across these main use cases, if you will, these are essentially cases that were closed where the flock system was used in some part of the investigation. So like I mentioned, could be a variety of different ways, but this is ultimately showing how many times each year these are resulting in crimes being solved. So things like warrants cleared, you can see is a pretty big one, and sometimes those are also turn into arrests, of course,
Sure.
depending on the situation. But that's a big one, right? And essentially how that works is an individual investigator can basically run that search for a suspect's known vehicle or license plate and figure out essentially where they're at, or get some idea of what parts of town they may be in, so that they can sort of look out for them. So things like that. So it gets a lot of usage. It's also a lot of data collection. I think there's typically in an average month over 500,000 sort of pings or vehicles that are scanned by the system across the city. And so I think that's where folks get concerned, is that it's a lot of data.
Exactly.
I have a lot of trust in the Pflugerville Police Department. I think they are responsible. They've had internal policies on how and when to use the system. One of the concerns that I hear a lot from folks is this flock system has a lot of AI capabilities, and that includes—
How would you search it if you couldn't? There is no possible way you could do this manually.
Absolutely. And where that also comes into play is that any given agency that has a flock account is able to basically say which other law enforcement agencies have access to the data. And so in Pflugerville's case, our police department has chosen to share with, I think, around 50 or 60, I think, other law enforcement agencies in the state. And so that is all of this together, along with additional uses of AI in the city overall, is part of why I am trying to push for some guardrails and some rules on how Pflugerville will use AI and surveillance technology. And it's really not not an ultimatum or anything flock specific. It's really saying, hey, the city's going to continue to use AI for a lot of different things. Like you said, Dennis, there's a lot of good that can be done, but we need to balance that with our residents' civil liberties, make sure that we trust the people that have access to the data. Like I said, if there's 50 or 60 other agencies, I don't know what their internal policies are, right?
No.
And we don't have contracts with those other agencies at this point. And so there's some basic things that I think would build trust in the city's use of AI.
Councilmember Ryan, what are your thoughts? What are your thoughts, your concerns? What are your constituents and the people that you meet talking about?
I think Jonathan summed it up very well, and he also had a lot of additional data points that I think are really helpful to understand the
Sure.
complexity and of this issue. When this first came up, in my time on council, I actually requested that report that's now on the website, so I can get an idea. Well, if we're having a contract for this, what has been the results? Like, what is this useful? Is it helpful? Because you have to balance, using all the tools that our police department needs to keep us safe while minimizing infringement on people's civil liberty and keeping data security in the forefront of our minds. So,
Right.
When Jonathan had talked about, hey, let's, look about formalizing the governance from a city council level, I supported that because I don't know if everyone knows, but staff adds things to the agenda. And if the council members want to add something to the agenda, they have to get a second. So it takes two people to get something on the agenda. So we were able to get that added to the agenda, and there was a discussion on it. People have concerns on both sides. And so I think it's slated for a lunch and learn in May to look at this further. We also did have a lunch and learn when Flock came in and talked to us about these things. And I did feel more secure in the internal policies and procedures from the police department, as well as from the software itself, to make sure that the data is safeguarded. Certain things like, it has to be deleted 30 days after, unless there's a specific case number associated with it. And there were some community members that raised some requests for more transparency. So that page on the city website now has a lot more access where you can, look at things. And I think Jonathan's proposal, makes it more transparent about what systems have AI, what are our data policies, what are those guardrails, so that our citizens can feel confident that it's being used for the purpose designed, and not anyone can just come and have access to our data. So, but those types of questions have really spurred me on to learn even more. So I really appreciate the community raising concerns so that we can fully educate ourselves on all of the pros and cons. It's important to discuss everything, have a well-rounded discussion, so you know that when the end result and the outcome of your vote, you know that you've considered all angles, and you can tell people why or why not something went forward.
That's wonderful. Because I feel one of the things that it concerns me. I mean, because I feel comfortable, because being a white male, I don't get. I have a different experience. I realize that I take my privilege with me, but I want to make sure people who do not share my complexion also feel as safe and as listened to and as part of this. And so, because I know if 50 or 60 law enforcement agencies have this, then that means that Department of Homeland Security also has access to it. I mean, there would be no way. I mean, that it's already been let out in this sense. So it concerns me. I want to make sure that we're being as safe as possible for all of our citizens, and we're making sure that we're taking care of that. And that's what you guys are doing here on council. So what's in your windscreen, Councilman Coffman? What are you going to be? What are on in the next month are the things that are most at the top level of council and top of mind for you?
Yeah, there's a never-ending list of things that, to Melody's point, that I want to continue to learn about and figure out and try to help make policy for with the rest of council. There's a couple of things that are next on my list, so to speak. One is data center regulation in Pflugerville. So I think not very many folks know that we actually have no data center rules in Pflugerville, and so so I think we should have them. And I'm not saying we should not have any data centers. We have 2 and 1 more under construction. But there are residents have concerns. I have concerns as well. We should have some basic rules to make sure that if a data center is going to be built, it's a responsible neighbor, whether it's water, whether it's electricity, whether it is the noise, whether it's lighting, all of those factors. And so I actually just, I've in the process of doing quite a bit of research on what other cities are doing. And so my next proposal, I guess I'll say, is that I'm coming up with some ideas of ways that I think we can put some, I feel like I'm a broken record in saying guardrails, but some reasonable guardrails.
They are. I mean, but guardrails are always going to be. You're not going to have a highway. You're not going to have a pipe without you're going to have some guardrails. And because we want to, I mean, especially, that's one of the things that I really feel like the opportunity that we have, that for every dollar that is brought in is accounted for and spent in the best possible way. Now, I know that there's no way to get down to zero, but continuing to make it to where you feel comfortable. You feel that whatever is being asked for in the tax rate in our city, that is being spent in the best possible way. And that's what you've been doing, Councilmember Ryan. I mean, that's part of your process and part of what you want to make sure that we're getting.
Well, definitely as a CPA, my background shapes how I approach the role. I've been an auditor. I prepare tax returns, so details matter and accuracy matters. But I'm definitely focused on thoughtful decisions, long-term planning, about infrastructure, reliable core services, being responsible with taxpayer dollars, and including delivering projects on time and on budget. And so some of my focuses over the past year is financial stewardship, making sure that we are talking about the impact of our decisions, because there are a lot of things that are on every agenda. And, it's important to have an economic impact statement or a fiscal impact statement saying, that really looks at the pros and the cons. Sometimes there's revenue, and that also comes with costs. And we need to be aware of that, and so I think I want to have more robust dialogues about these. So, and then part of that is about communicating as well with our residents and making sure that they understand what's happening and they have the opportunity to be a part of the process. So one of the things I was happy to have achieved last year in the budget is to have staff was actually able to review our capital improvement plan, which is very large and ambitious. And in the past 3 years, we've only been achieving anywhere from 20% to 40% of what we had budgeted to achieve. And that has long-term repercussions about if you budget to spend the money in a certain time, then you budget to borrow money in a certain time, and then you need to charge rates or you need to have taxes to cover that. So having really good construction timelines and really, good understanding of when we need to pay the money and basically, about the capital projects, I think we need to be realistic. So they were able to
realistic.
Trim that down.
Oh no.
Yeah, unfortunately, there are construction things that happen. There's, you have to always have that buffer. But they were able to reduce the capital improvement plan in the current budget by $274 million after doing a closer evaluation.
What does that mean, Councilmember? What does reducing that mean? I'm not sure I understand.
Well, it's about what it was, reducing the amount that we thought we could achieve this year and being more realistic about it. And that drives the debt process, and the debt is what makes our water rates go up or increases our taxes. So that's really important. It's the debt component, but that is secondary to the projects. So it's just being realistic and about the timing on that. And then I also want to have more robust discussions on the projects, on the priorities, because it's a long document. And, I'm advocating for more time to review it and more time.
It's only like 300 pages, Melanie.
Yeah, I know.
And $2 billion worth of projects.
And of course, you can do that in your spare time on your weekend, like you say, Councilmember. I mean,
yeah, well, if I can get into Excel, I can do a pivot table and understand some things a little bit more, but it's a lot to digest. It really is. And, if we know we're only going to be able to achieve this amount of, progress, because we have great staff, we have great partners in our contractors and our consultants, but there still is limited resources in time and money.
Of course.
And
So
so,
you really have to, you have to be the parent at the table and say, okay, now we've got this much to split between all of the children, and to make sure that we're making sure that we're having it equitably distributed in the proper way.
absolutely. The other thing too is, in my world, I look at budgets and forecasts, and then we go back and we look at the actuals. So that's another thing, is, okay, we have a forecast for 5 years or 10 years or whatnot, and that informs our planning. It informs the decisions on when and in what priority we're going to complete projects. So it's really important for us to have data-driven decisions and saying, okay, 2 years ago, we forecasted we would have this many water connections or this many homes or this many, whatever it is. How have we, how have actuals compared to that forecast?
Yep.
Because then you need to recalibrate, right? You need to focus.
No, accountability.
So that's what it's just about having the discussions and having the data. So as you mentioned, we spend our time outside of our regular full-time jobs, away from our family and friends and sleep, to do this for the city, because we all have a love of the city. We have a love of our residents, and we're trying to make the best decisions. But it takes a lot of time to understand, and a lot of times to digest all of these 150, 300-page reports that mean a lot. Yeah. And I want to make sure I understand it fully, because it's much more important to take the time and initial due diligence before you start a project than to, figure out down the road, well, we didn't do this the best way. So it means you take a little bit more time.
Exactly. Right? We front load in being able to do. All right. Well, let's make a turn in this last quarter as we're doing.
Could I add one more thing to this? I think one of the, I know. I think, Melody made a ton of great points about that. And I agree. I think that the staff and council has made a lot of progress. I think there's a lot more that we can do.
Good.
One of the things that people ask me about pretty frequently since being elected is what are some of the most surprising things since you've been there? And one, I think we've touched on a lot of those, because it's a lot of the topics that we've been discussing. I also think that the balance between that long-term planning for what's Pflugerville going to be in 20, 30 years from now, while also making sure that we're responding to resident requests for potholes and leaking fire hydrants, and those types of very day-to-day things. Yes. And so I think that's another level that I really want to see all of us this year try to put, have a little more balance, is how I would say it, in terms of, yes, we absolutely have to make the big, difficult decisions, but I think we also have plenty of things to improve the day-to-day quality of life of our residents. Right. So I think that balance is important.
Segue. That's exactly what I want to segue to. Quality of life. Oh, you're so good. That's perfect. Councilmember Ryan, could you talk about the quality of life, the investment that the city council, as they're thinking about that at that level? I mean, we've been talking about under the ground and all the things that have come up in the infrastructure. But now we're talking about the kinds of investments that we're making in the quality of life that are coming to mind for the city council.
Well, thank you for that. I did start my tenure with the city on the Parks and Recreation Commission. I served there for 6 years. So I'm a big proponent of our parks and recreation. We were named the Trail Capital of Texas this past legislative season. So that's wonderful. We've been investing. When I first started, it was hard to try to get a bench within 5 or 10 feet from the playground. And when I moved here, I had just started my family. So I visited every park. And so the city has really invested a lot with prior councils as well as the current council in bringing things like shade to parks, to seating, to these wonderful community events that celebrate the residents and the unique and special people that live here, with Slice
Yes.
of Pflugerville, with Deutschenfest, with the holiday parades, with the menorah lighting that, is, and lots of different things, so that everyone feels like they have a place here, that it's welcoming, and that you can see yourself here, and that you can get out. Like I need to do that sometimes, get out of my home office and go on a walk on the
Mom,
trail.
put down the report and come.
Literally, they do say that. So there's the community voted in 2020 for a lot of different park projects, as expansion of the amenities at Lake Pflugerville, and as well as the recreation center, and then that was expanded as well. And so some of those things are still yet to be started. And so I've been advocating. We're talking a lot about Lake Pflugerville and the water, but there are also a lot of ways that people use that beyond, which was so great with the foresight that they had 2 decades ago, to have the recreation, to go there for the trail, to go there for the swimming when there's water. But, there's lots of people use the beach. We've, have a lot of use of the parking, and, a lot of children, like to play at the
Yes, I've been out
playground.
there.
And so that was actually on the bond in 2018. And so I'm really looking forward to getting that going, and improving those recreation opportunities, for our citizens, as well as another thing that I'm very passionate about is making sure we have geographic parity in our parks and our trails, and that all areas of the city have access to parks and trails close to them as if possible. So there were a lot of undeveloped parks when I joined the Parks and Recreation Center, where it was basically a lot full of weeds, and I'm like, what are we going to do with this? So there's still a few that are there that could be improved. Now, I'm patient, and we have to do things in stages over time, because it does, cost money to build these as well as maintain it. But I think, a city council meeting probably over a decade ago, I went and they had a report that said living close to a park brings great value to your home and your neighborhood. And so those are things that, there's a lot of different aspects of the city that we need to focus on to make it a great place to live here, to make it easy to get around, that you're not stuck in traffic, light all the time, that we're investing in the roads, but also investing in biking opportunities and just outdoor recreation to get people together to meet their neighbors. Because really what makes Pflugerville so special, that I noticed from where I lived before, is that people were so welcoming and friendly. But you only experience that when you get outside and you get out of your car and you get into the park. So music in the park and all of the things at the lake, and the different really fun activities. And I can't forget about the library, because that's one of my favorites.
And I've got plans for the library. I've got some things that Renee and I are planning for the library, and the things that are coming up. So you'll see those. Council Member Coffman, talk about quality of life from your perspective and your advocacy.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that what Melody has been talking about is absolutely spot on. In terms of quality of life, obviously our parks and trails are incredibly important. The redevelopment and improvements to our old downtown, I think, are something that I'm really excited to continue to work on and figure out what the right answers there. So, we're about to have several buildings that will be emptied out because our city employees will be in downtown East, like this year, early next. And so, the process has already started of, well, what does the future of downtown look like? And that started a while ago, but there's sort of some renewed energy now around figuring out what's possible there. And so
is there a public-private partnership that way, so where we can work with that? Is that something that is going on?
That's definitely one of the options on the table. Council has not set a direction yet. Really, just city staff is doing research and some market analysis and those types of things to see what the different options are. I would imagine a public-private partnership is pretty likely ultimately
Sure.
to get help with that investment. So I think that's really things like that provide more of those places for people to come together, and I think so. That's one example of quality of life. I also, similar to Councilmember Ryan with delivering on the rest of the parks, I feel really strongly about finishing a lot of our roads. I can't tell. I think that probably every week someone either gives me grief about or has questions about Kelly Lane, right? And
Why does this
many
not
others.
just
I know. And so, those types of things, again, if you're going to get somewhere, we need to make it as easy as possible. And one of the great things about our roads that are either reconstructed or new roads that are being put in now is they include multi-use paths. So not just a small sidewalk, but a 10-foot sidewalk, essentially, that folks can bike, jog. There's room for strollers and wheelchairs in parallel. And so, while traffic and reducing traffic is great, as we're building out those streets, we're also trying to invest in ways to make sure that it's not just car-based mobility. And again, I think that's another way that we can improve quality of life here. The other thing that I'll mention, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but one of the things that I am looking into right now as well on the public safety side of things is our current ambulance provider and the quality of service that they're providing and whether or not that is appropriate for what I think.
Now, this is a private ambulance, Allegiance, right? Instead of having the Austin EMS that was the competing service, right? Is that for our viewers? And go ahead.
That's right. Yeah, and I won't go into the long and contentious history of those things.
How much time?
Yeah,
how many hours do we have to yes.
Yeah, but the short answer is basically that yes, for the last few years, we've had a for-profit private provider. What I've discovered, and because council gets periodic reports on things like response times and those sorts of things, is I've discovered that those response times aren't necessarily hitting the targets that they should, and we also see occasionally complaints about the quality of care. And so, again, think about quality of life. I want to feel safe with our police department. I want to make sure that the fire department is going to be able to get to my house quickly if there's a fire, heaven forbid. And I want to make sure that if I need to go to the emergency room and get to a hospital quickly, someone's going to be able to come, get here, take care of me or my family members, and have a high expectation of that. So, all of these things play together, right? I think in terms of quality of life. And so that's just another example of something that I think is really important.
Well, we've reached, I think we've reached a good closing point on that. And I want to thank you both for committing to a quarterly time. So I'm just telling everyone in advance that this is what we want to do. We want to do these quarterly and do an update and see what have we learned, how have we done. So closing to your constituents, Councilmember Ryan, would you please share your thoughts?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think it's so important to raise awareness and educate the public about what's going on, as well as hearing from everyone about what their concerns are. Everyone is unique in the different parts of the city and have different concerns. And so it's so important to have that collaboration, that communication with everyone. The other thing is, one of my top goals is financial transparency for us to have those conversations where we're making big decisions that affect property taxes and water rates, that affect the affordability of people to be able to live here throughout all of their lives from start to finish.
Right.
And so those are the things that I'm doing, and I want to listen to people and I want to hear, and then I want to have those robust discussions where we can, fully vet all of the contracts or the policies that we're having to make sure that we're leading in the right direction and that we have the right data and that we're updating it frequently. to make the best decisions possible. And this is, some things are short term and some things are long term. And so I do believe that we can have a great value in the city while also being affordable to live here. So that's my balance.
Thread that needle. Thread that needle.
Yeah.
All right. That is exactly. All right. Member Coffman.
Yeah, definitely. And so I'll echo part of that as well on the financial stewardship and responsibility, as well as the transparency pieces. I think there's a lot that we can do to improve both the transparency and reporting on those types of things, but also the communication of those items, of when major decisions are made and what the impact is and the thought process behind those decisions. So that's definitely an area where she and I have been trying to partner on as much as we can. I think another big piece of affordability to me is our housing diversity, and so the types of homes that are available to people who are moving to Pflugerville, or if they're changing life phases and need a different circumstance. One of the things that I was able to do recently was sit down with a couple of council members from Austin who are interested in potentially starting a new coalition of Central Texas cities to specifically work together on affordability in a lot of different avenues, but especially with a focus on things like housing, because we know that, for example, folks move from Austin to Pflugerville and people move from Pflugerville to Hutto. And so it's a little bit of a side project and a longer term thing, but I think that those types of partnerships and collaborations are things that I really want to start and continue to build up. Because I think ultimately, we're part of a larger region, whether it's economic development, whether it's housing and affordability, whether it's transportation. And so I want to make sure that we have really great relationships with our neighbors, both in my neighborhood, but also, us as government officials and city staff, et cetera, in terms of working with other entities, especially given, what I think the difficulties of budgeting is not going to get any easier going forward, right? And so that's why I think things like transparency and looking at these projects more cohesively is incredibly important. One example that I'll mention, although I know we're running out of time, from last night's council meeting was an agreement between the PCDC, which is our Economic Development Corporation, and the Pflugerville Fire Department. So the Pflugerville Fire Department gets a portion of the sales tax. And so this agreement says, hey, if it makes sense, they could potentially participate in an economic development project with the city by contributing some portion of the sales tax that they get. And if we combine that with ours, can that go further? And so thinking about those types of ways to make our tax dollars go further, I think is something that we're all going to have to get a lot more comfortable with and knowledgeable about how to make happen. None of this stuff is easy, of course, but I think that that's one of the areas where there's a ton of opportunity, and I'm really excited about me personally, as well as the rest of our colleagues on council, being able to pursue those types of partnerships going forward.
Thank you both. Thank you both, council members Ryan and Coffman. Thank you so much for joining us in this effort, because one of the things we can do, we can find different ways to communicate to people so that people can feel heard. Because if we feel heard, then we're part of the process, and that's what you're doing here. Thank you for joining us on this first town hall, and I look forward to seeing you in, let's see, March, April, May, and June. We'll get a chance to see what's happened. I wonder what's happened in the next 3 months, and see what kind of adventures that we're all on.
Yeah, well, people are going to be watching closely, so.
Yes, they are, and so we'll be all right. Thank you, everybody. Thank you for tuning in on this town hall. Thank you for the city council members. I think you can see why we're so fortunate to have you, and we'll see everybody next time.
Thank you.
All right.